So, the story kicks off with our girl being royally pissed at some dude, and she decides to wreck his house using a freaking excavator. Turns out, the reason she's so ticked off is totally ridiculous. It was the author of this novel who offed her favorite character. The novel was called Dawn of Repentance, and it blew up pretty fast, but it got a ton of flack for its simple plot. In the end, there were only like 30 readers left who were still into it and waiting on the next chapter. The vibe and the characters in that novel felt super real to them, and they thought the author was a total pro. Our girl was one of those die-hard fans, even running the fan club. But now it's all over. Her favorite character, Sion, who was a real piece of work, ended up dying of some disease. She'd even recently ordered an unreleased chapter for herself. But when she started reading, she was seriously bummed to find out her favorite character bit the dust. That's when she got it in her head to get revenge on the author. Suddenly, the TV flipped on by itself, and an emergency broadcast started about a massive tremor downtown. Mad as hell, the girl punched the controls, but then she caught herself, 'cause she'd borrowed this excavator. The boss is gonna lose it if he sees this damage. I mean, he should understand how bummed she is. But on the other hand, she didn't see any reason to apologize. And then she heard a voice that offered her divine protection. Thinking she was imagining things, she tapped herself on the temple to snap out of it. Right after she did, everything went dark. She thought she'd passed out, but then she opened her eyes again. The steering wheel was gone, and her mind was flooded with memories. These weren't her memories. The girl figured she was losing it from pure rage at the author, but all the memories felt way too real. And looking down at herself, she realized she'd become Mitchell Nephthys. This had to be a joke, plus she was locked up in some kind of prison. Mitchell was a duke's daughter, heir to his lands, and famous for her magic skills. Oh, and she had silver hair and eyes as blue as a mountain lake. But in the novel, she was a straight-up villain, notorious for being totally ruthless and doing seriously messed up stuff. Savage Mitchell was also the main character's favorite, 'cause she'd managed to trick Prince Sion into marrying her. The die-hard fan remembered the scene like it was yesterday, how Mitchell lured a hammered Sion out of the banquet hall and dragged him back to her bedroom. All it took were a few basic lines to get her there. And then, gorgeous Jan let down his long hair, which flowed down his ripped body. He agreed to everything, and tears streamed from his eyes, black as night. That's when the fan noticed something was off with the story. Her memories definitely didn't match the novel's plot. She couldn't figure out why the author skipped over such a crucial moment. She didn't like that, and now she regretted even more that she never got to wreck that bastard's house. But now she's Mitchell Nephthys, and what's worse, she's locked up. Life wasn't exactly a picnic for her before, and nothing's really changed, but she has no clue how she ended up in someone else's body. Then she remembered the voice, offering to accept divine power. So, she got reincarnation as a gift, but she wasn't thrilled, because Mitchell's in a dungeon, which means she's gonna die soon. She mocked Sion, and they sentenced her to death for it. Now she's short on time, but her body's got a novel fan in it who ain't going down without a fight, especially since she remembers every single detail about this world. Then a status window pops up with Mitchell's skills, and one of them is super rare. Fusion. Maybe that's what caused the memories of both girls to merge. But the fan really didn't like that she was a goner, and the execution was in just 3 days. Because Mitchell's facing the death penalty, some anomalies appeared in her status, which is totally normal in the novel. But she couldn't just sit around and do nothing. Immediately, she started yelling, calling for help, hoping they'd give her a chance to plead for mercy. But no matter how much she screamed, nobody came. Plus, she was even surprised by her own screaming, like something out of a period piece. All she wanted to do was call for someone calmly. Immediately, a notification popped up saying she had the ambition skill and that she only pledged allegiance to the Crowell imperial family. She realized that acting like she just did wasn't exactly Duchess material, but she decided she was going to do things her way. The girl started banging her shoe against the bars as hard as she could, hoping someone, anyone, would hear her. Only then did the guards finally notice her, and Mitchell started begging them to let her out, promising she'd do whatever they wanted. A miracle happened, and soon she was riding in a carriage. She was just glad to be free again, even if it meant giving up her noble name and title. She'd been rejected by her family and the Empire. Mitchell was a lost cause, and to top it off, they whipped her back 5 times right before letting her go. She thought her skin was going to peel off, but the main thing is she survived. In the novel itself, Mitchell thought she'd rather die than give up her family name. But things are different now. The heroine wasn't afraid of what was coming. She was sure she could handle anything that came her way and survive in this world. She was so happy, she even started humming at the top of her lungs. She couldn't believe that just a little while ago, she was about to wreck the author's house. then knocked herself out and woke up as Mitchell. It was terrifying finding out she was sentenced to death. But using her knowledge of the original story, she managed to dodge that death sentence. Now she's free. On the carriage ride over, I figured I'd mess with my status window and allocate those experience points. I got 'em for dodging a near-death experience, thanks to that jailbreak. I decided to dump these points into freezing. See, I'm an ice mage and already got basic freezing powers, so leveling that up was the obvious choice. That way, I can actually make some cash-hunting demons. After a while, the carriage pulled up to the Nephthys mansion. I gave the coachman a quick thanks and bolted out of there, wanting to get inside as soon as possible. I needed to grab some of my jewelry before my folks kicked me to the curb. Selling it would at least keep me afloat for a while. Besides the jewelry, I figured I'd snag some gold too. It'll be easier to unload at the market, and it's always worth a decent chunk of change. Suddenly, the door creaked, and the girl panicked, thinking the Duke and Duchess were back early. But it was her nanny, Eleanor Loof, who walked into the room. Seeing the wide red welts on Mitchell's back, the nanny was super worried about her young mistress. After all, she'd raised the girl like her own daughter. Eleanor put so much effort into raising her, both scolding her and supporting her like a real mom. Now she was practically crying over Mitchell's wounds. The girl loved this character too, since she was special to Nephthys, and now she could see her in person. It was so touching that Mitchell couldn't hold back the tears. The nanny demanded to know why there were bags everywhere and how the girl had gotten into this mess. That's when Mitchell started to doubt that Eleanor would be on her side. She confessed she was sentenced to death for trying to attack the prince, but they let her go, though they stripped her of her title, and now she doesn't even have citizenship. Hearing that, the nanny got even more worried, but also pissed, that she acted without thinking. She wanted to give her a smack, but held back, since she promised to support her. Then Mitchell admitted she'd be working for a living. The nanny explained it wouldn't be easy, since she'd always been a duchess and never faced any real hardship. The girl already knew that, but she wasn't afraid of hardship. In her past life, after her parents died, her aunt vanished with all her inheritance. She had to do all kinds of jobs just to survive. And she always managed to get by, even when money was super tight. She used plants around her to feed herself. Right now, the situation didn't seem that bad. And in 3 years, she'd be an adult and could start a business. The nanny listened to her charge, but she asked her to wait here a sec, said she was going to grab something, and Mitchell was hoping she'd cough up some cash. You can imagine her shock when Eleanor came back with a suitcase and announced she was going with her mistress. She even suggested they head to her hometown, said there's a house there her sister used to live in, just sitting empty now. Mitchell thought it was weird, since the nanny was pulling down a good pension here. She tried to talk her out of it, said she could handle things herself, but Eleanor was stubborn and wasn't letting her go alone. To her, it was like dying. The nanny admitted she loved the girl so much she couldn't live without her, and those words got to Mitchell. And Eleanor was already dragging her towards the exit. The girl told her to hold up and suggested they take a peek in Savi's treasury before they left. That's when the nanny realized the girl's personality hadn't changed a bit. Yeah, she was that brazen, even threatened the emperor. Mitchell treated it like swiping candy from a baby. But now she had the key used by the official heirs, and this girl was going to use it. It didn't take long before she had that sack stuffed to the brim in the treasury. Now all that was left was to open the gates, and they could bail out of this mansion and start a new life. They started out on foot, then tried to flag down a passing carriage. Luckily, the very first one stopped. Mitchell was stoked to ride in a little comfort, but the carriage ended up being super bumpy the whole way, which only made her back hurt even worse. Her wounds weren't fully healed yet, and the constant jostling just amplified the discomfort. Understanding Mitchell's condition, the nanny reached out and handed her something. So this girl got a weird thing, and Eleanor explained it was her kid's biochip. With it, Mitchell could finally become a full-fledged citizen. The nanny was going to help the girl any way she could, seeing as she raised her like her own daughter. Her kid never even got a chance to use it. In this world, you gotta register at birth, then prove who you are by implanting a biochip made of magic stones. The nanny's kid died a long time ago without ever using it, and she couldn't bring herself to get rid of it, so she just kept it. Mitchell thanked her for the gift and swore she'd never forget her kindness. Then, she got the idea to call the nanny Mom, which Eleanor thought was a little strange, since she was just a commoner. But the girl threatened to toss the chip out the window if she refused. So Eleanor agreed, but she was still going to call the lady Miss. So, the girl got curious about how much it would cost to get a chip implanted. As soon as she said that, the nanny pressed something against her hand, and Mitchell felt like she'd been tased. The girl freaked out a little when she saw a small cut after that. Turns out, that's how they implant the chip. The girl thanked the nanny, but asked her to give a heads up next time. After all, now her hand hurts on top of her back. The nanny suggested she check the chip right away, adding that her kid's name was Evan Leif. Mitchell herself got curious about what new abilities she might have. She swiped her hand and a window with her name popped up, and she figured Evan's chip was old, so it wasn't being recognized. So, she tried her other hand, the one with Evan's chip implanted, and it worked. Now she can see 2 status windows, and right away, she wanted to check what new skills she'd unlocked. She reassured the worried nanny that everything was working fine, and the nanny was just happy her charge could finally live a normal life. Still, Mitchell was dancing on the edge of death. She saw that Dawn had been updated and now threatened her with death if she enrolled at Crowell Academy. The girl decided to pull herself together. She'd already cheated death once. Maybe she could change the plot again. And she confessed to her mom nanny that she was planning to enroll in that academy. Eleanor couldn't see what was written in the window, so she calmly promised to prepare everything perfectly. That's when the girl remembered the entrance fee was crazy expensive. She couldn't imagine how her mom, who couldn't even afford her own retirement, would come up with that kind of money. And Eleanor was just thrilled that Mitchell would succeed once she got in. This girl figured she should get accepted first, and since that wasn't happening tomorrow, she planned to hustle up some cash. Plus, a commoner trying to get in has got to be either a genius or ridiculously skilled in combat. Word is, 2 real oddballs are joining this year, so the whole semester's gonna be hell. At the start, they'll activate a magic circle to power up the heroes, and at graduation, they'll summon a major demon. Because of that, only 12 students will make it out alive. So if Mitchell even gets in, the risk of dying is huge, but she thinks it's worth it. After that, both exhausted girls asked the coachman to stop at a hotel. Back in their room, Mitchell tried on an outfit that made her look like your average nobody. She was disguising herself as Evan. Mitchell was so delicate and beautiful that she immediately drew everyone's eyes. That's why she needs to hide her shimmering hair and doll-like face as much as possible. She covered her eyes with old-fashioned glasses and braided her hair into country pigtails. Freckles were even painstakingly applied one by one with a needle. Now, Nephthys looked like the most backwoods girl Eleanor had ever laid eyes on. The nanny actually thought she smelled like chicken manure now. The girl's disguise was so good, even people who knew her well wouldn't recognize her. The preparations were complete, and it was time to continue their journey. A long road lay ahead, and Mitchell asked the nanny to tell her about her hometown of Elam, even though she already knew every single detail about the city from the original story. Recently, that place has started to really take off. Elam's right next to the Demon Tower, and things have been getting crazy active there lately, which means tons of work around here. Demon territory's perfect for growing mana crystals, and Mitchell's got her eyes on scoring some for herself. After a few days of taking turns, resting, and riding, they finally rolled into their destination, the port city of Elam. Mitchell was taken aback, because this was supposed to be a village, but the town's blown up, probably thanks to selling all that mined marble as raw material. Before long, the girls got to the nanny's sister's place. Eleanor immediately dropped to her knees, thinking her lady was gonna have a rough time living here after all those years in the mansion. But Mitchell suggested they unpack first and say hi to the neighbors. Just then, this dude Thomas came up, instantly recognizing Eleanor. He's curious why she's back when she wasn't planning to, and with a kid no less. Looks like she got into some trouble in the capital. The dude was dropping hints about how messed up it'd be in this creepshow house with no security. But that very night, Mitchell grabbed a pickaxe and slipped out. Decided she needed to get some exercise, apparently. Thing is, she knew that weird neighbor had a point, and she had to deal with the threat. He seemed like the type to throw a punch first, ask questions later, and she couldn't just ignore some guy threatening their precious peace. Once, after a fight with her dad, little Mitchell brought home a baby dragon as a pet and took care of it. But a year later, because she wasn't careful, the dragon smashed its cage and got loose, hurting like 20 people. She didn't know why she was suddenly remembering this. But Mitchell had experience hurting people, and even if this guy wasn't planning anything, he wasn't getting off that easy. She snuck up behind him and raised her hand to strike, while Thomas just kept rambling, not understanding why she'd chosen to live here. Then, he dropped the bag and left, completely oblivious to the danger behind him. Looks like he just left something, trying to help out, even though the girl immediately saw it as suspicious. And the next morning, he showed up with tools to fix up the house a little. Judging by how Mom and Thomas talked, Mitchell realized they used to be close. The girl apologized to him then, but never actually said what she was sorry for. Eleanor said that Thomas wanted to be a pirate, but it didn't work out, and now he makes a living fishing. Suddenly, Mitchell confessed that she was also trash, who nearly ruined someone else's life, and now she's ashamed. But realizing Thomas had a boat, she decided to try and make some money off of it, and she asked him to take her fishing next time. But both the adults were against it. The nanny worried, 'cause the sea's dangerous, and Thomas didn't want to take a kid who hadn't spilled any blood yet. So Mitchell grabbed her tools and headed for the door. She decided to take a walk, grabbing her compass, a map of the village area, and her pickaxe. She was heading to the Mana crystal mine. They're in high demand, used to make artifacts and fishing gear. Plus, it's the place where Tikti, the Sparrow clan member, got trapped. Then some guy from the Bear clan sold him on the black market. The girl knew she had to be careful, because if she got caught and sold, it would cost her her life. Still, she planned to rescue Titi and change the way things were going. For that, she'd get experience and buy skills to make money, enough to get into the academy. Mitchell started looking around, but there was no sign of Titi yet. So she figured she'd start chipping out crystals, and she was at it in that mine for almost 3 days straight. Then she heard something, but it definitely wasn't Titia. A dude with white hair, slit pupils, and scaly skin showed up in the clearing, which was super freaky. This guy was just doing his own thing, like he didn't even see her there. He started setting out bowls, like he was feeding stray monsters or something. Then he grabbed a chunk of meat and started waving it around for no reason. But suddenly, whoosh whoosh, noisy wing flaps. Mitchell saw this wandering albatross swoop in. She'd seen them at the zoo, and they're the kind of bird that's always soaring. Thing is, these birds can't take off or land for crap. Now it was literally crashing into the guy, then went for the meat, looking all pathetic and dumb. Mitchell decided to stop paying them any mind and get back to work. So, for the next few days, she kept mining crystals, and that dude kept feeding the monsters. They ended up seeing each other every day for a whole week. Then, out of nowhere, the stranger just walked up to Mitchell while she was hammering away at the rocks. He even started talking to her, assuming she was a miner. She said no, and he didn't ask anything else or say another word, which was kinda weird. He left, and Mitchell went back to what she was doing. A notification popped up. She'd unlocked a miner skill, which would be super helpful later. Mitchell decided to test it out, and crystals practically rained down on her. She immediately called that guy back over. After apologizing, she said I could call her a miner, since she'd leveled up and was getting congrats from a random dude. That made her happy, 'cause now she could gather resources even faster. But the crystals ran out in that spot, so the girl decided to head out a little further. To the guy, it just looked like she was destroying rocks. He got curious about what she was going to do with all that loot, and she admitted she was going to sell it to the Demon King's territory. Suddenly, the blonde dude went wild and said he had to kill her. His face darkened, and he popped his claws. That freaked Mitchell out. She never thought she'd die this soon. This half-human was going to offer just because she was heading into the Demon King's land. But all of this felt kind of familiar to her. Looking at his savage side, Mitchell racked her brain, trying to remember where she'd heard something like that before. Then it hit her. It was the Demon King's signature way of talking. This guy's a white demon fox, usually all soft and gentle, but that way of speaking was his trademark. Tons of fans even copied the way he talked. And now, here he is, ready to kill. But she knew what to do, thanks to her knowledge. She blurted out that he must have decided to kill her here, so her loved ones could at least bury her body. But then she played it off like a joke and reached for her picnic basket. Mitchell pulled out a couple of sandwiches and offered him one, saying it was her apology. At first, the food actually tasted pretty good to him, but after he chewed and swallowed, he felt disgusted, and Mitchell admitted she was a terrible cook. Seeing her blush, the half-human decided to cheer her up a bit, and the girl just became even more convinced that he was good and decent, especially since he cared about animals. So she finally decided to introduce herself, saying her name was Evan Leff. The guy introduced himself as Gert and asked Evan for permission to thank her properly next time they met. The very next day, he showed up with a bunch of boxes of food. The girl was totally thrilled. Everything looked delicious, and Gert confessed that he'd made it all himself. She immediately tried some and was blown away by how good it was. Mitchell suggested Gert should get married with skills like that, but he's got a kid, which is why nobody's marrying him. Turns out, he's also over 500 years old. But it's amazing he looks so young, especially when there's a story in the village about a 300-year-old who looked ancient. Turns out Gert doesn't age because he's half lizard, sheds his skin the second he gets wrinkles. Mitchell thought that skill was totally rad. The dude didn't know what rad meant, so she explained it was like, amazing, sweet as honey, and from that moment on, Gert started using the word in, like, every single sentence. They said goodbye, and she felt a little weird hearing him obsess over that one word. But she had to get back to work, and soon enough, they were all out of crystals here. She's been here a whole month already, and she's only got 126 days left to live. What sucked for her was that she and her mom had done so much to get her into college, but they still didn't have enough cash. So, she decided to move on to Mr. Thomas's boat. To make it happen, Mitchell Neftis needed to snag a harpoon, so she went off to find a blacksmith. On the way, she saw a bunch of girls huddled together, super hyped about something. Mitchell remembered her mom always saying to mind your own business. Just say hi and move on. So, she figured she'd take Eleanor's advice on this one. Still, she asked the girls what was up, and they instantly knew whose kid she was, just by the way she talked. Turns out they were talking about some girl with bruises, getting beat up by her drunk husband, but she can't complain because nobody'd believe her. Realizing what the deal was, Mitchell decided to go talk to that girl. This was a chance to make some cash, so she told the bruised girl it was time to fix her hubby's bad habits. Her bluntness freaked the girl out, especially when she said it wasn't free, but all the girl did was beg her to stay out of it. The beat-up girl ran off, and Mitchell yelled her address after her, telling her to come by any time. That was just the bait. Now we bring out the harpoon. But the blacksmith refused to sell her one, said it wasn't for her until she offered double the price. She promised him that once the harpoon was ready, he'd be her first target, then added she was just kidding. Half her cash was gone just like that. And that night, the beat-up girl showed up at her place. Mitchell was expecting her, sure, but not so soon. Still, she invited her inside. This stranger's wounds looked even worse than they did earlier. They started talking about fixing her problem, and Mitchell said it would cost 1,000,000 crowns. That price seemed crazy high to the victim of her own husband. So Nephthys offered a 10-month payment plan, adding it was a special deal, and the girl took it. They decided to get started right then and there, and headed to the client's house. She still didn't think her husband's habits could be changed, but Mitchell asked her to trust her on this. She had experience from her time in HR, dealing with guys who were right on the edge with booze. And now she's got a bunch of crazy abilities on top of that, so she bursts into the house, which pissed off this drunk. While he was yelling at the uninvited guest, she just walked up to a stool without a word. And remembering all her rage, she hurled that stool at the arrogant jerk who dares to raise a hand to his wife. 'Cause someone like that, you only get through to him with a little bit of force. Then she kept him locked in the sauna until he passed out. Plus, she decided to test out her freeze skill on him, 'cause she definitely didn't feel bad for a scumbag like that. Using that skill causes bleeding, because it starts with mental energy, so the body starts to bleed. If you keep going, it'll drain stamina, and then he'll start coughing up blood. And at the very end, you're burning through all the energy you've got left. You could end up bleeding out. But Mitchell hasn't coughed up any blood from overuse of her freeze power, so maybe her skill isn't as bad as it seemed. First, the girl froze that scumbag's hand, and he started screaming. Not just from the pain, but from the freaking sight of it. But that didn't sober him up, so Nephthys decided to keep going. The dude had no clue what he'd done wrong, so she spelled it out for him. Treat your wife right. He wouldn't admit he was guilty, and just got angrier. Mitchell laid down the punishment for about 10 minutes, and only then did the guy apologize and swear he'd never do it again. Job done. The girl asked the client to pay the first installment of 100,000 crowns. After the homeowner went to get the cash, Mitchell threatened the guy, saying she lived nearby and would be keeping an eye on him. And if she ever gets wind of him acting out of line, she won't be so forgiving next time. She'll straight up come and ice him. Afterwards, his wife came back and paid up for the favor, and she was allowed to pay the rest whenever she could. Before leaving, Mitchell told her to reach out if anything came up, and the girl was super grateful. A week went by after successfully finishing the job. Word about Nephthys' services spread like wildfire, and people even from other cities started hitting her up for help. The girl tackled all sorts of problems, even the small ones, and quickly made 5,000,000 crowns. Plus, her skill levels went up. Now, Mitchell could focus on finding Titi, but she had no idea when he'd actually get caught and sold. To help with that, she used her health skill. Damn, she really can haul ass, and that skill keeps her from getting winded. Which means we might actually find Titi today. All of a sudden, she gets a search skill and almost trips, trying to figure it out. She literally just thought about it and boom, new skill! Gotta be those Evan skills kicking in. Mitchell immediately fires up the search, and now she can see every little detail and hear the faintest sounds. Then, she hears a bird chirping nearby. She takes off like a shot, especially since she's only seen Gert so far, no other demon humans. Plus, Titi's one of the main characters from the original story. Seeing this bird all tangled up in netting, Mitchell's like, how the hell did he even get stuck there? And Titi just keeps flapping around, trying to break free. The original story didn't say how he'd be caught, and she never imagined it'd be this messed up. The way they catch birds around here is with a loosely strung net. That's how Tita fell for it, but for some reason, he was clinging to that net like his life depended on it. Mitchell looked around and realized getting him out wouldn't be a problem. She told the little bird to hold still while she worked. But that didn't really work with a sparrow. But she got it done quick and leveled up for it. Afterwards, she let the bird go, telling it to stay out of traps. and continued on her way. Something had been bugging her ever since those 2 status windows popped up. She was dying to know where the points for changing the story would go, so she opened the windows to check. Turns out they doubled, which was a nice surprise. So, Mitchell decided to boost her freezing skill first. She was stoked that mining and scavenging were actually paying off. It helps both characters level up their skills at the same time, too. Just as she was getting hyped about unlocking that freeze spell, TD started tailing her. Mitchell noticed him, but had no clue what he wanted. Then the bird lifted its wing and showed her a wound, but she didn't think it was worth her time to heal it. She figured the bird should be grateful, not acting like a freaking leech. Nephthys told TT to leave her alone and go take care of his own business, hoping he understood what she was saying. I mean, he's not just a bird, he's a demi-human, and shouldn't be pulling dumb stunts like ignoring her or stalking her. After a while, Mitchell finally headed home. Eleanor was totally thrown when she saw the little sparrow following the girl. Mitchell got a little flustered. She figured the bird was just sticking around because she'd saved it, like a grateful little puppy. And now it was brazenly climbing all over Eleanor's hands. Being injured like that, it completely stole her attention, and the woman immediately started patching it up. Not wanting to watch, Mitchell decided to bail again. She told the nanny she was heading south, but the nanny suddenly protested, saying they couldn't go there. She was laying down the strict mother routine again. She was calling her Evan Leaf now too, and the girl worried that if she got caught now, they'd definitely kill her. Still, she decided to go through with her plan. All right, since everyone's calling her Evan now, that's what we'll call her too. Evan Loaf. Eleanor suddenly remembered Evan helping her find her runaway kid way back when, and thanked her. But the girl didn't say a word. Then, she heard from the nanny that the harpoon was finally ready. Heading to the smithy, Evan thought the harpoon looked pretty damn good, even for a grumpy blacksmith. But the price was still a killer, so she smiled and asked for a little discount. The blacksmith wouldn't budge and just kicked her out. Not understanding why he was being such a jerk, Evan went to put her next plan into action. Now, she just needed a boat. But first, she had to get a skills assessment certificate to prove she was useful on board. After that, sailors even started asking her to join their crew, but she kept turning them down. Soon enough, she found the most state-of-the-art boat she could. Time to head over to Thomas Illam's place. Even if Eleanor's gonna blow a gasket about me going out on the water. Thomas started sweating bullets when he saw Evan on his boat. Eleanor swore she'd castrate him if anything happened to the kid, but the adventure seeker herself wasn't worried about that. Besides, she flashed the neighbor her certificate, proving she's a seasoned fisherman with a killer knack for finding fish. Her search skill was at level 4, so Thomas told his mate to steer wherever she pointed. And sure enough, a school of fish appeared in no time. After that, the guys kept asking Evan for directions. The girl paused for a sec, then went over to the railing to check out the fish in the water herself. She wanted to know how much marlin went for. Thomas confessed, like 20 grand a kilo, and Evan started climbing over the rail. She was set on catching a marlin and asked the neighbor to pull her back in later. Soon she was scrambling back on board, griping about swallowing seawater, which only freaked Thomas out more. But she had to do it. She couldn't just let 20 grand get away. She didn't even care that she was freezing in the cold water. But the fisherman was worried sick about both of them, 'cause his hide was on the line too. Evan told him to stop stressing so much, and suggested they swim out even further next time, because she's planning to catch a tuna, which is even pricier. But Thomas was so freaked out, he'd rather die than take her out there again. However, his tune changed when she got good money for the catch. He even offered to always swim together. Now all that's left is talking to her mama. Thomas promised to watch over the girl, but it seems that didn't calm the woman down. It only made her even more furious. She knew damn well her daughter only came up with this fishing idea to get the academy entrance fee. Still, her heart was twisting with worry. Why couldn't Evan just do something easy? And then the Adventure Guild leader shows up. Everyone and their mother wanted to work with her girl. Even kids were showing up, handing over cash. Eleanor was freaking out. What were kids doing involved in this? They could be getting scammed. Turns out Evan was babysitting for them on the side. Eleanor could see how much her lady had grown up. But good luck figuring out what that little devil's thinking. Sometimes Eleanor would vent her worries to Titi. She couldn't figure out when her lady changed so much. The bird listened intently, like it understood everything. To the lady, people were always just pawns. She didn't care if she had brothers or sisters. She only considered the Duke and Duchess her equals. But now, her personality's mellowed out. Even the neighbors are stoked about how friendly she is. Maybe her time locked up is what caused the change. Eleanor never thought the day would come when the lady would actually become a real person and start fresh. Meanwhile, Evan was itching for some new adventures on the boat. Thomas spotted her tossing something into the water, but she wouldn't fess up to what it was. Truth is, it was the last thing she grabbed before leaving. It's the Nephthys family heirloom, and now a piece of it's headed to the bottom of the sea. Back when water was worth its weight in gold, the Nephthys family could conjure it up thanks to their magic. By selling tons of water to drought-stricken areas, the family made an absolute fortune. The emperor then appointed them the country's main water supplier. Everyone knows the story, but the truth is, they found ancient artifacts digging a well. One sucked stuff up, the other spat it out. That's how he got water from reservoirs and pulled it out of thin air, which meant he wasn't a real magic user, just exploiting magic items. But to keep up appearances, the family hired a bunch of real mages, and eventually, a kid with actual powers showed up. The artifacts were still kept as family heirlooms, and when Evan ran away from home, she swiped them just in case. Now she's tossed one of the rings into the ocean to suck up the water. It's her latest get-rich-quick scheme. And to get it going, she needs to put on the other ring. Thanks to Evan's skills, she could freeze seawater into icicles and use them as free harpoons. Now they were definitely gonna catch some real tuna. Thomas didn't get why she was so obsessed with that type. But hey, it fetches a good price. And the girl needed the cash to get into the academy. Realizing he could make a killing too, Thomas vowed to head out to sea every single day from now on. But the next day, the weather guys were calling for a typhoon. That was a major bummer, especially because they were pumped about hitting the water daily. So Evan decided to go digging instead. She knew the safe zone was pretty much tapped out when it came to crystals. She was about to venture further out when she ran into that Gert guy again. They hadn't seen each other in ages, and she'd grown up a bit, so he was giving her the once-over. Her body looked stronger too, and Gert was itching to feel those muscles. Suddenly, Evan heard this yapping sound coming from behind him. Sure enough, there was a white fox strolling up, but he swore it wouldn't hurt her. Evan wasn't scared anyway. She had a taming skill and figured she could make friends with the little critter. And then she stared right into the fox's eyes. The beast calmed down, and the girl went back to the previous topic. Realizing Gert wanted to feel her muscles, she hadn't actually gained any muscle mass. She was just stronger because of her skills. Then they started talking about mining crystals, which were running low and wouldn't be enough for Evan. The girl wasn't bummed. She wasn't planning on coming back here anyway. That confession kind of bummed out the lizard dude. He was having a hard time reading his friend today, because she wasn't saying much, and the fox kept interrupting. He knew she needed crystals and remembered one way to get them. But first, he wanted to know how they'd see each other if she stopped showing up, and Evan suggested he come to her place. Then she explained how to get to her house, behind the big cedar tree, but the fox was way more stoked about it than he was. This beast was a demon named Hubert. He's the 120-year-old deputy king of the monsters, also the king's son, and he was out with his dad today for specific reasons. A while back, in the tower, Gert confessed that he was meeting up with Evan. The fox thought it was weird that his father had been meeting with the same girl for several days straight. That just wasn't like him. Dad told me about this girl, and from his description, she sounded kinda weird to Hubert. I mean, she'd rather mine crystals in a monster-infested pit, and she wasn't even scared to have dinner with my old man. Guess she didn't know you're supposed to avoid hanging out with the monster lord. So, last night, Hubert went to talk to his father. The old man was worried, 'cause Evan hadn't shown up to mine crystals in days. He's even been off his food lately because of it. So Hubert decided to hook his dad up with this girl, no matter what it took, and took him out there the next day. And when he finally saw her in person, she seemed different. The girl had this intense aura about her, which just didn't match someone who's only 17. The demon fox was actually relieved that this chick only came for crystals and not the monsters. He figured she had at least 3 skills, and he could feel her magic getting stronger all the time. Hubert was starting to dig his dad's choice, because she'd be a worthy partner for him and a good mom to the demon beasts. The fox knew right away she was the future mom and respected his dad's taste. Time to say goodbye to the humiliation they'd been dealing with, being motherless. The girl noticed the fox's smug grin, but had no clue why he was so happy. She also noticed that Gert wasn't saying super awesome, and he explained he was afraid of losing his son's respect. That evening, Hubert was helping his dad get all spiffed up. He suggested wearing the cloak that was meant for ceremonies, but he just thought it would look cooler. The fox wanted his old man to impress this girl, or she wouldn't even become his friend. The kid also suggested bringing a more expensive gift. He explained that Evan's mom would be there, so he needed to make a killer first impression. Apparently, this kind of thing is a big deal in the human world, but Gert barely knew anything about the girl or her mother and had no clue what kind of gift to bring. He was also sweating bullets, worried her mom would be a total nightmare. But just to be safe, the Monster King took the advice to get something on the pricey side. The next day, Gert headed over to Evan's place. Even with the rain coming down in buckets, Eleanor already knew her daughter was having guests, and was worried this guy would have a tough time getting there. But Evan never doubted he'd keep his word. And sure enough, Gert knocked on the door, which Eleanor found surprising, thinking her mistress' friends were odd, especially after she saw that, despite the downpour, he was completely dry. They both told him to come inside right away, but the girl was more focused on his fancy outfit, while Eleanor figured he had to be some kind of aristocrat. Gert admitted his son suggested it, which confused the nanny, and Evan blurted out that her friend was actually a demon. Eleanor just giggled at that, and Evan still couldn't figure out how he'd stayed dry in such crummy weather. Then, Gert presented them with a gift, some tough, durable fabric. The girl was so happy, like she'd been waiting years for it, and ripped the box open immediately. The fabric really was unbelievably beautiful, and Evan suddenly wanted to wear only the best clothes again, 'cause what she had on looked more like a burlap sack. That set Eleanor off, who had a lot of respect for the work of other seamstresses. By now, the typhoon had gotten worse, and Eleanor, being the gracious host, offered to let Gert stay the night. But the guy turned her down, said his son was waiting for him back home. Gert clarified that it wasn't some little kid, but a full-grown young man, which threw the nanny for a loop. I mean, the demon lord looked so damn young himself. Just then, Titi came out, and Eleanor realized she hadn't even introduced herself yet, so she gave her name. Gert figured he hadn't properly introduced himself either, and then he just dropped it, saying he was Gert, the Lord of Monsters. For a second, everything went quiet. Evan seemed even more surprised than her caretaker. TT was getting worked up too, so Eleanor decided to take him away before anything happened. But the young woman just couldn't get over the fact that she was standing in front of one of the Demon Kings, the Lord of Monsters. So that's why his way of speaking sounded so familiar. She just figured it was a thing with you beast folk. But if Gert's the actual overlord, what the hell happened to the real king? Turns out they just thought the fox was king because he was playing the part. But Gert didn't like the way Evan's tone shifted, and if she wanted to know why, she needed to chill. The girl agreed, and he started with what went down 2,000 years ago. Back then, the Dragon King was basically just a giant lizard, and the other kings weren't thrilled that the monster overlord was a lizard demon that looked like the Dragon King. So the dragon started acting up, and that's when Gert created Hubert and made him his second in command. The fox was also using his dad's mannerisms. While Evan was trying to wrap her head around all this, Eleanor brought in dinner. Seriously, why wasn't this stuff in the original story? She decided to just focus on the fact that Gert, the guy she met while mining crystals, was the first real friend she'd made since arriving. Time to chow down, so they decided to start dinner. Eleanor told their guest to dig in, but the food looked more like poison than grub to him. That set her off, and she automatically grabbed her trusty broom. Evan knew they had to get rid of Gert, but he remembered his son's advice. He had something more to say. Curiosity got the better of even Eleanor, and she calmed down. And then, the Demon Lord officially asked for permission to start a relationship with Evan Leaf. A heavy silence fell over the table again for a moment. Evan herself was hoping he meant friendship, but her mom understood perfectly and got seriously ticked off. The girl just wanted to make it clear she was talking about friendship, since she already thought of him as a friend. Gert was cool with that, but then he said he wanted Evan to be the mother of his kids, which totally freaked both girls out. And Eleanor just lost it, man. She went ballistic, charging at this creep with a broom, 'cause he was hitting on a miner. She was beating him like a drum, and he just kept rambling about his feelings. I mean, you can see why Eleanor snapped. Some widower with a kid's trying to snatch up her precious daughter. But Evan? She wasn't even mad about the offer. Plus, this whole thing was about to send the plot sideways, so she stepped between Gert and Eleanor. She whispered to her friend to get out of there, promising they'd talk later. The dude agreed, promised to visit again, but that just fueled Eleanor's rage even more. Seriously, her scream was so loud, you could hear it out on the street. And Evan realized you don't mess with her mom, seeing as she took down the Monster King with just a broom. The girl decided to check her XP, which had gotten a huge boost from changing the storyline. She blew it all on leveling up her skills. Everything was cool at first, but then Evan started feeling weird, and her head was spinning. Looks like something went sideways. And then she saw the system spamming her with a ton of messages all at once. She got some new high-level skills, which was awesome, but the nausea just wouldn't quit. The girl told her mom she felt like crap and then just passed out. Meanwhile, back in the Nephthys Duchy, the head of the family's detective bureau rushed in with some big news for the Duke. They'd finally tracked down Lady Mitchell's location. Duke Pilot Nephthys demanded they spill the details immediately. Where was his little girl? They told him she was holed up in Elam, the hometown of her nanny, Eleanor. As proof, they handed the Duke a few photographs. Pilot instantly started flipping through them, hoping his kid was okay. He noticed she looked kinda off, But what she seemed to be doing, according to the photos, was even weirder. The detective explained that Mitchell was out in the boonies, and she was obviously dressing that way on purpose, to hide who she really was. At that, the Duke's anger turned into a smile, and he exclaimed, thrilled, that his daughter was a master of disguise. Turns out, Mitchell's been working her butt off, saving up for the academy entrance fee. The Duke realized that's how she plans to reclaim her noble title. Gotta graduate from that academy to do it. That place is also famous for its sweet perks. They even have a knowledge faculty where all the top brains in the Empire hang out. And the martial arts faculty trains the Empire's toughest warriors. There's even a magic faculty where they train mages with all kinds of powers, and that's the heart of the academy. The Duke understood his daughter's intentions and knew she'd pull it off. He even teared up knowing she had to go through all that crap from the royal family, but she's still not giving up. She would have made a killer match for the prince, but they sentenced her to death, and the Duke swore he'd get revenge for that someday. He even felt like just paying her entrance fee himself, but if he sacrifices too much, it'll raise flags, and he ordered his daughter to be supported through the Adventurers Guild. The assistant then reported that the young lady had already earned half the fee, and if she keeps this up, she'll have the other half in no time. The Duke realized Mitchell had a plan and decided to only support her when absolutely necessary. He also decided to package up the prince for her. Sure, he rejected Mitchell, but a little brainwashing and he won't be able to resist such a charming girl. The next day, Mitchell's brother, Lyle, found out she was joining the academy and was stoked. He even went to their dad to make sure it was legit. This is his chance to see his dear little sister again, and Lyle decided he should join the academy with her. He loved her, even though Mitchell treated him like dirt. She couldn't even remember his name, but he didn't care. Everyone's got flaws. So the kid straight up told his dad he was going to apply. Mitchell became the gold standard for this, even though it's way out there. After Lyle left, Pilot finally chilled a bit, promising himself he'd support his darling daughter however he could. And Mitchell Evan came to after a while. She realized she'd passed out, but immediately saw her mom and Thomas's happy faces because she was awake. The neighbor immediately freaked out about her coughing up blood, but Eleanor was sure her daughter got sick because she was shocked by that jerk's proposal. Evan's head was pounding. She decided to not level up so recklessly next time, and then she got flooded with notifications again. So, she noticed the Charisma of Nobility skill. It's an upgraded version of Grace, but it's not likely to be useful at the academy. That leaves the skill with the ominous name, Aura of the Beast. Either way, it's better than respecting some royal bloodline, so Evan chose that one. But now it needs testing, and she turned to her mom. Then Evan told them to shut their traps because it was too loud. Eleanor took it as her daughter wanting to rest, and told her to call if she needed anything. But the girl realized that it didn't work quite right. Something changed after upgrading the skill, but to figure it out, she needs some kind of power. She started getting annoyed by this and zoned out again. While she was out cold, demons came to visit, including a spider demon, and the tiger demon stopped by to see if she was recovering. The girl realized Gert had a ton of friends because of his personality, even though he doesn't seem like a people person. But Evan was worried that he hadn't shown up for some reason. She didn't want to think about it anymore and decided to go to work, even though Eleanor didn't want her to because of her condition. But the girl still needed to save up half the deposit. On her way to her uncle's, she sensed a threat, and bam! The tiger demon jumped her from the bushes. Evan immediately swung her harpoon, and the beast leapt back. Even she was surprised by her reaction, but she suspected it was because of her newfound superhuman skills, and that demon actually complimented her. Taking one look at him, Evan realized he was one of Gert's buddies who'd come to visit her. But since he threw the first punch, she figured she'd teach him a lesson. She used the family heirloom to save energy and blasted the demon with ice spears. She didn't want to overexert herself right now. Then she launched a regular harpoon at him, but the tiger swatted it away, saying she couldn't beat him like that. So Evan decided to just beat the crap out of him. Her elbow to the solar plexus was so powerful, the demon went flying. But he wasn't mad, just complimented her again, saying she exceeded his expectations, which Evan didn't get. The demon just laughed and admitted defeat. Then he explained that Hubert raised a fuss about the Monster Queen, and he decided to come see for himself. The tiger dug her fighting style, and even he recognized her as Queen. The girl was like, "Nah, I don't see myself that way." But the demon gave her a get-well gift, then booked it out of there, quick. Evan figured he was just nuts, so she checked out the bag. Inside was a demon beast core. She took it to the Adventurers Guild for appraisal, and they valued it at 10 million crowns. She thought that was a sweet deal and agreed to sell. Now she was closer to reaching her goal, but she still did odd jobs for the locals. Then one day, while fishing, she finally caught a tuna. She could make a fortune now. Thomas was stoked that this girl could finally get in. Suddenly, Evan covered her face with her hands, but her uncle figured she was just crying tears of joy. But then he freaked out when she started coughing up blood. So, she ended up back in bed for a while, because she'd passed out from exhaustion on the boat. Last thing she remembered was being stoked about catching that tuna. She realized her uncle must have carried her here. She liked him and the other villagers so much, she almost didn't want to leave. She really wanted to stay, but the application deadline was coming up fast. Plus, the rumor that she's got a ton of cash would spread, and her mom could be in danger. But on the other hand, if she left, there'd be no one to stay with her mom anyway, since her uncle's always out at sea. That's when she heard a chirp and found Titi under the covers. She didn't get why he wasn't flying away. His wing was healed, right? Then she decided to test something out. This kid's a demon too, and he's got the juice to protect Mom. She ordered him to transform, or else she'll snap his neck. A second later, the little sparrow turned into a child. Looks like she's about 10 years old, and it's a girl. And she immediately started begging for mercy. Wrapping the little girl in a blanket, Evan explained what this kid had to do. If she refused, Evan threatened to reveal her darkest secret. Originally, Titi was friendly towards the people in her village, near Elam. But because of her demon blood, most rejected and belittled her and the other beast people, even though they weren't hurting anyone. And a seal was placed on their village to prevent them from attacking Elam. But that important barrier was accidentally destroyed by dumb Titi. After that, she ran away from the village and fell into a trap, where Evan rescued her. So, since the girl knows the secret, Titi agreed to help out. She's got to watch the house till Evan gets back, and if Mom gets hurt, she's toast. This made Titi happy, because now she had a shot at staying here for good. Titi decided to go meet the lady of the house right away, but just ended up scaring her half to death. Reacting instantly, Eleanor tagged the guest with her broom, but then she saw it was a kid and felt bad. And Evan realized she probably didn't need to worry about her mom at all. Then she headed out, because she got an invite to the Monster Lord's tower. Hurt promised he'd give her the royal treatment, and even though he didn't visit while she was sick, now he's suggesting they meet up, which works out great for Evan. She was planning on telling him she's leaving Elam. She spotted him not far from her place, wondering why he'd come all this way to meet her. Gert just asked her to give him her hand. The girl wasn't exactly thrilled about holding hands and strolling along like a couple. That's when Gert explained he was using his return skill, and they'd be in his tower in a flash. Teleporting, basically. Evan was definitely intrigued by this way of getting around, but the guy warned her that the first time might make her dizzy and told her to close her eyes. The girl closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them again, they were already on the top floor of the tower. There were tons of demon beasts here, including that familiar tiger and fox. The place was decked out and fancy, but the smell was so gross that Evan had to plug her nose. The stench of rotten meat, animals, and who knows what else drove the girl straight into the White Prince's arms. Those beast demons, used to this stink, couldn't figure out why Her Majesty was so sensitive. Gert hadn't even realized a smell could be this bad. Then, he saw Evan coming back, but she could barely stand. She really did start to fall, but the quick-footed fox managed to catch her, then chewed out his dad for not taking care of the smell. Hubert apologized and carried the lady outside, but she asked him to put her down and immediately bolted behind a tree. The fresh air, after throwing up her guts, made her feel way better, like she was alive again, and Hubert apologized, admitting his father didn't want to take her away because he liked her. The girl understood that, and knew he wouldn't mind if she left. He'd never been rough with her, plus she could see he was totally freaked out himself. So, Fox promised by her next visit, they'd get the place fixed up and get rid of the stink. Suddenly, Evan bowed to him, showing her thanks, and realized her monster aura wasn't kicking in. That means Fox is stronger than her, and he didn't get made deputy for nothing. Then, he walked Evan back to the house and went back to the tower. But even just seeing his back, the girl realized she'd seen Hurt for the last time today. Anyway, Hurt won't be wanting to meet again anytime soon, not till they fix the tower. So Evan calmly packed her things and bought a horse. She'll have to leave first thing tomorrow to get the school uniform sewn and earn a little more cash. But the worst part is, she won't get to see her mom. And grabbing a pillow, she ran to her. Eleanor was just happy to have her daughter sleep over, and the little sparrow snuggled in with them too. The next day, Mom and Titi, still in her girl form, came out to see Evan off. Eleanor told her daughter to take care of herself, and if any stuck-up nobles hassled her, to remind them she was from the Nephthys family. And she also advised her to secretly beat the crap out of them, since she was so strong. Then, Evan gave Titi some finance books, and asked her to collect the rest of the money people owed her. She also promised to come back for the holidays. Suddenly, she saw a crowd of people who'd come to see her off, holding banners and with tears in their eyes. It really touched Evan's heart. Everyone she knew and mostly hung out with was there. She noticed a guy with his face covered in the crowd, but decided to ignore it. Finally, the girl thanked everyone for seeing her off. Thomas just kept ribbing her, saying this country bumpkin still didn't know how to talk right. Evan said goodbye again and told them to take care of themselves. Eleanor, tears streaming down her face, begged her daughter to come back safe and sound. Evan didn't want to leave her mom either, but she had to go. No time to get soft now. These months of training are gonna fly by. Once she left Elam, the girl rode almost non-stop. And thanks to her riding skills, she was so comfy in the saddle, she nearly dozed off on the way. She also cleaned out every bandit she ran into, so she wasn't bored, that's for sure. In the end, the journey took 4 days. And here she is, standing before Crowell's capital, Chronopolis, ready to jump right into action. First, she needs to sell the horse and get a room at the inn, then have a uniform made from the fabric Gert gave her. Time for Evan to ditch those baggy clothes for good. She headed to her old favorite clothing store, the one that was super popular. They've been expanding like crazy ever since rumors started that the Nephtes heiress had disappeared. They almost didn't let her in because she looked so beat up. But just as the clerk, Amy, finished talking, a dagger whizzed past her ear and stuck in the wall next to her, and Evan explained that she was a customer, no matter how she looked. She also admitted she was a student and wasn't scared of the local guards the clerk was about to call. In fact, she demanded they get the manager. The freaked-out saleswoman ran off, offering the customer some tea while she waited. And Evan, she was feeling pretty damn good about herself. She loved the mess she stirred up so much, she decided to lay on the threats a little thicker. A poison resistance skill just popped up? Someone tried to poison her. Now Evan's got an ace in the hole. That's when Mrs. Ronell, the boutique owner, came waltzing over. Evan asked her to grab a bottle, but the woman reminded her this wasn't some department store. So, the girl just straight up said the clerk poisoned her tea, and she needed it wrapped up for the guards. Amy immediately confessed it was just a laxative as punishment, but Evan wasn't backing down. That's when Ronell promised to do anything this customer wanted. That put a smile on Evan's face, and she demanded a Crowell Academy uniform be made for her. And on top of that, it had to be done ASAP and be top-notch quality. Ronell got the fabric she'd been drooling over. The girl admitted a friend who lives near the Monster Lord's tower gave it to her. This stuff is seriously tough. You couldn't even cut clothes made from it with a knife. But there's a downside, because even a needle's gonna have a hard time getting through. You'd need a special artifact to sew it, so the whole job's gonna cost a fortune. 10 million, but Evan agreed to pay up right away. She even promised to overlook the whole attempted poisoning thing. But the thirst for revenge was burning, and she demanded the saleswoman drink the tea herself, said it would destroy the evidence. Amy panicked, but the director just stood there, silent. The saleswoman froze over the cup, knowing that laxatives are only safe in moderation. She chugged that drink in one go and bolted straight to the bathroom. She was gone for ages, and Evan was bragging to Ronell about taking down 17 thugs on her way here. The entrance ceremony was still a month and a half away. Once the uniform situation was sorted, Evan decided to make a little extra cash. Meanwhile, back at Crowell Imperial Academy, the dean got a letter from Duke Nephthys. They were old buddies, and Pilot was checking in on the dean's affairs. He also sent over a few recommendations and promised to pay handsomely for them. The first condition was, Evan Laef has to be accepted, no matter what, or else the dean was screwed. He looked at the girl's file and saw she was a total knockout. He even wondered if the Duke had been hiding another daughter for some reason all this time. Pilot always had a thing for beautiful women. Even his wife was chosen for her looks. But that girl had magic powers, which is how they ended up with a mage kid. Still, the Duke's request felt weird to the dean. The second thing was, Evan had to get credit, or someone's losing their head. The dean didn't even want to imagine what this kid was like. Maybe she is Mitchell already. Plus, the Duke stayed silent when his eldest daughter got sentenced. The third thing was, the magic faculty dorm always needed to have spicy and salty food. The dean realized this girl was a higher-level mage than that Mitchell chick. He still didn't get why Pilot rejected his older daughter, but he had to keep his mouth shut, because rule number 4 said if he blabbed, he'd die too. The dean realized this Duke was as batshit crazy as ever, and Evan had been hustling side gigs for a week and picked up her uniform. Time to head to the academy, but a crowd of happy clients came to see her off in the capital. The girl was confused, because she hadn't really done anything for them, but she said goodbye like normal, and people told her to change her accent so she wouldn't be an outcast at the academy, and the guys promised to take care of things if the aristocrats started hitting on her. Only then did Evan realize she actually might get accepted. Soon she arrived at the academy's entrance exam center with 3 judges who held her future in their hands. It was Evan's turn to enter the hall, There, they asked her to demonstrate her skills and kill at least one demonic beast. They brought out a freaking demon hound for the girl, but she immediately said she wouldn't kill the thing because she felt sorry for it. The dean was actually surprised because the duke had said she was super ruthless. But then Evan announces that instead of the beast, she's ready to off the examinator, which would totally prove her skills. Now the dean just thinks she's straight up nuts. And then she uses her ice spear skill and a barrier skill, which seriously freaked out the judges. They demanded she stop or they'd boot her out of the exam. But Evan didn't quit until all 3 judges were screaming that she was accepted. They wanted to tell her something else, but the girl had already bolted for the exit because she was starving. With nothing better to do, the examinators just called in the next candidate. A redhead walked in and, spotting the icicles right away, figured there was an ice-type magic user among the new recruits. Intrigued, she asked them to introduce her to him immediately. She comes from a family line where, for generations, only fire mages are born. This is Reyna, daughter of Count Letham, but they refused to give her any info about another student, saying it's against academy rules. Then this girl decided to show off her skills and started blasting the ice. Flames were spitting all over the hall, and they told her to knock it off. Meanwhile, Evan headed to the academy cafeteria, hoping to finally get a decent meal. She'd been craving food that actually suited her tastes for ages. After eating, she went looking for her room, and, after wandering around a bit, finally found the right number. This room's gonna be her home for the next 4 years. They say the magic faculty's full of psychos, so they stick 'em in single rooms. She wasn't worried about herself, but she was glad she wouldn't have a roommate. But the second she walked in, she saw someone was already chilling there. There was this redhead sprawled out on the bed, holding a rose in her mouth, smirking like crazy. Evan immediately told her that this was her room. Reyna then introduced herself, and Evan realized she was one of the main characters from the original story. She's cynical on the outside, but inside, she's bursting with raw passion. She never gives up in a fight, burning her own life force to blast magic and crush her enemies. But right now, she's acting all kiss-assy, and Evan figured this ain't the real Reyna. She went to call the director, but the redhead asked her to listen. She started by saying she was a fire mage, and Evan was an ice mage, which naturally isn't exactly the best match. So, they could be great enemies, hating each other's guts, which she was happy about. 'Cause that'd help them become famous, you know? Then she clarified that they didn't actually have to be enemies, just pretend to be. Reyna admitted that Evan was the only one she could trust to watch her back, and getting attention just makes her feel better. But Evan thought this redhead was nuts, and decided it was better to move to another room herself. That's when Reyna announced that her mom locked all the other rooms. That means there are no rooms left. That pissed Evan off. She wasn't about to lose her shot at a private room. Deciding to ditch Red right now, she grabbed her harpoon and blasted her with ice magic. But Reyna threw up a flame shield and fire of her own. The ice started melting, so Evan switched tactics, demanding Red give back the real Reyna. She lunged with the harpoon, but Reyna skillfully blocked it. This girl's crazy strong. Maybe she's got some kind of superpowers too. The dorm supervisor showed up because of all the noise. He told them to stop fighting, and Evan was like, "Why the hell are you showing up now?" "I called you," Reyna snapped at him, telling him they were deciding whose room it was going to be. Evan just figured out this chick isn't the real Reyna. She's convinced this character wasn't always like this, though it could be another Gert situation. But right now, that wasn't the main issue. Evan was about to shut her down right then and there, so she wouldn't cause any more trouble. But the supervisor butted in again. He docked a point from each of them, since fighting is a no-go in the dorms. Bottom line, if they lose 5 points each, they're kicked out of the dorm. And students who get kicked out have to live in a tent city until they graduate. The girls apologized, but that won't help them get their points back. When the supervisor left, Evan jumped Reyna again, blaming her for everything, while Reyna blamed Laef. Eventually, Evan realized she'd have to share a room with this psycho for 4 years. She figured she'd go for a walk, clear her head. But Reyna was all over her, no matter where she went, saying they had to work together. Soon Evan was wiped, but the redhead? Nothing. If anything, she looked like she was buzzing with energy. Ever since they moved in together, she and Reyna bickered constantly. But Latim always threw the first punch, and Evan had to defend herself. And she didn't pull any punches, so they ended up drawing the attention of everyone in the academy. Before long, the day of the ceremony arrived. When she got there, Evan couldn't find Reyna anywhere, and hoped things would go smoothly for once. Then the opening ceremony was announced. The dean and the rectors gave their speeches, which very quickly made Evan want to pass out. Things got interesting when it was Aiton Pollitt, the freshman rep's, turn to speak. Dude was the top dog in the science and tech department. They also called him the princess's copper titmouse because of his chestnut hair and olive green eyes. and the princess totally had the hots for him ever since the entrance ceremony. But then it hit Evan, and she decided she had to check the time limit, like right now. It was gone in both statuses, and she was totally lost, wondering what the hell the idiot in charge was doing. Then another one popped up. Now she's gonna die if she doesn't take first place in the magic department this semester. Evan realized she didn't need to stress about studying. She just had to get rid of Aiton. All these constant changes were seriously pissing her off. But hey, her life's always on the line, and she handles it so she can handle a written exam, even though she's basically a total dumbass when it comes to studying. After a while, they announced the entrance ceremony was over, and Evan was still stressing about deadlines. She knew this could be it. Head hung low in despair. She didn't see Raina sneak up and trip her. Next thing she knew, Evan was face-planting the floor, and the redhead just mocked Lef, saying she was even disappointed in such a pathetic fall. Then she bolted out of there, but she heard Evan moaning in pain, even felt a little bad, and offered to take her to the infirmary. Leif was seriously feeling like crap. She perked up a bit in the infirmary, and Raina even brought her the schedule she asked for. She needed it to figure out if she could snag the top spot. She'd be golden if there were easy, hands-on type classes. The schedule had applied magic, combat practice, and a bunch of other stuff. The girl realized brute force alone wouldn't cut it, so she asked Raina something. The education level here is crazy high, and Evan's definitely gonna bomb at math. But Raina cheered her up and told her to sit in the back of the class. Then she gave the injured girl props for showing up at the ceremony just to avoid running into her. Evan realized that the redhead wasn't such a bad person after all. But for some reason, she's totally different from the original, and Lef figured it might be her fault. Pretty soon, it was time to head to class. Evan decided to buckle down and study, hoping to get better, and tried to focus on what the teacher was saying. But she quickly realized there was no way in hell. Now, her only hope is that nobody else can pass the test. Then she'll win. So Evan planned to slip everyone a sleeping pill, so she'd be the only one to ace the exam. Thinking she was a genius, the girl didn't notice the red-haired she-devil tailing her, and she calmly headed off to her next class. This should work out perfectly, because the moral code class is taught by Professor Heinrich. He was a nobleman, and he hated commoners. Back at the academy, he was aiming for a promotion, which meant teaching at the magic faculty. That's where he cracked. And once a few mages got wind of it, they started making his life a living hell. Long story short, the professor lost his mind and offed himself before the second semester even wrapped up. Evan figured she could change up the story this time around too. After all, she needed to snag that top spot, and that meant pulling out all the stops. But let's be real, there were a lot of crazies hanging around the magic scene. I mean, the academy churns out the best of the best, with its brutal magic faculty training. That's how the experience exchange program got started, but it's only for the top dogs. Plus, they gotta be able to, function in society to even get near the system. In the next class, they started going over how to snag a rabbit. The students immediately started buzzing, bragging about who'd already caught rabbits. Raina asked the teacher if she could share her experience. She started explaining that rabbits have a lot of nerves in their ears, so they don't move if you grab them by the ears. She thought that was a killer answer, and she was feeling pretty proud of herself. But the teacher didn't seem to think so, because he asked someone else for their thoughts. He called on Evan Leif, who explained that you should carry a pet rabbit in your arms, which was the correct answer. And the students in the class instantly started whispering. But Evan realized these lessons were going to be about trying to cram some common sense into these knuckleheads. After that class, the girl went for a walk. She was going to head up the mountain behind the dorms to gather some herbs for leveling up. Evan realized that living out in nature was way simpler, but only if that redhead wasn't around, the one who showed up the second Evan thought about her. Before long, they spotted a sign for the town of Starlight Glade. Truth was, it was a homeless village, and the girls headed that way. On the road, it turned out Raina had no clue what greens were. Evan tried to snap back, but then her attention was snagged by a fern right under her annoying friend's feet. Leif was stoked, because it was usually so hard to find. But for Raina, it was just a weed, so Evan explained that it was edible and a great seasoning. The surprised redhead decided to taste it right then and there, and Leif then confessed that young fern was poisonous. Raina immediately started lisping, grumbling why Evan hadn't warned her sooner. And Evan read that it even boosts your immune system. She didn't know how that'd help with math, but it could seriously up your resistance to any kind of poison. Seeing Leif start eating too, Raina was even more surprised. Soon, Evan got a response to her work-study scholarship application. Now it'd be 300,000 crowns a month, which wasn't much for everyday living. But to make some extra cash in the city, she'd have to swim across the lake. So, Evan decided to work as hard as she could during the break. Leaving the building, the girl accidentally bumped into signs for the martial arts and magic departments. Judging by the look of the signs, Those two departments don't get along. The girl almost wanted to take a picture, but she doesn't have a camera, and thought to ask Reina. That's when she felt the dark aura and saw Heinrich hurrying towards her. He was probably rushing because he was being chased and didn't have a choice. Evan remembered how much he hated commoners. It's gotta be those commoner chicks chasing him, the ones whose clothes he thinks are all nasty and gross. There was this whole scandal about it once, and the other students went ballistic on him. He'll end up offing himself, and Evan was determined to change that outcome. Easiest thing would be to just kill him right now, but that'd just lead to the same result. So she decided to take out the stalker warrior first, and launched ice spears at her. The girl dodged the ice shards, and Evan noticed a scar on her face. Now she realized that student was probably hiding her face with her hair, specifically because of that scar. Leif walked over and told her to quit stalking the professor. And if she didn't stop, Evan would start stalking her. And not just till graduation, but till she's pushing up daisies. But she didn't like being stalked either. That was out of the blue. But the professor decided to let it slide and not dock any points this time. Once he was gone, Leif repeated her warning to the student. She also told her to have more confidence, because the scar wasn't that bad. The girl totally freaked out at those threats, and Evan was about to let her go, but reminded her not to do stuff that pisses other people off. She hoped that girl would stop harassing everyone else. After that dressing down, Leif seemed like some kind of professor to the student, even though she didn't look like one. Evan was silently impressed that, even with the scar, the girl was seriously gorgeous. Then she left, and the freaked-out student was dying to know who she was. Later, Evan decided to have some fun sweeping the courtyard. The weather was killer, plus Reina wasn't around, which was the best thing ever. A little earlier, they were testing the power of abilities in combat drills, and the professor announced they needed to pick a group representative, but that just set the students off. So yeah, the first class was a total bust, but then the teacher picked Evan as the rep, because she was just standing there, watching the chaos, and not acting like a maniac like everyone else. Leif basically thought dying would be preferable. She said she'd only agree if they let her blast everyone to bits, which was her polite way of saying, no way. So when she applied for that scholarship, they asked her to handle the paperwork. The girl figured, what the heck, she'd give it a shot. But she screwed it up so bad, they let her go from that boring side gig. Now she's free to do something else, and since Rain's grounded, she won't be underfoot, which made Evan super happy. While sweeping, she could get closer to the knowledge faculty. Now that's her new mission, just out of curiosity, to get a peek at what's going on in there. But even more important, her precious prince is studying there too. Rounding the corner, she actually saw His Highness Sion on a bench and couldn't believe her eyes. There he was, alive and well, and her heart almost burst with joy. Dude felt something was off, like his peace was disturbed, so he started looking around. Meanwhile, Evan, hidden in the bushes, couldn't get over how handsome he was. She honestly thought he'd be a total wreck after that day, locked up in his room. But there he is, just chilling, studying at the academy. She's dying to talk to him, but if Sion figures out she's Mitchell, she's screwed, so she's got to watch from afar. While the prince was trying to figure out who was watching him, the wind snatched his bookmark right out of his book. That bookmark landed right at Evan's feet. She felt like it was fate, like there's no way the wind could have been that precise by accident. She couldn't hold back anymore, and when she stood up, she almost ran right into the prince. The girl was still sweating bullets that he'd recognize her, but judging by how he acted, he didn't recognize her as Mitchell. Then, he calls out to some hick, and Evan realizes he's talking to her, because there's nobody else around. Sion demands the stash, but she's hesitant to go any further, doesn't want a fine for crossing the border. And then she drops this bomb. If he wants the stash, he's got to beg her for it on his knees. That seriously pissed the prince off. He even turned red from this commoner's taunts. But Evan thought he was kinda cute even like that. Guys from royal blood usually have guards around them in situations like this, but Xian had that privilege taken away. Now he's like some broken, powerless loser. Guess the aristocrats are laughing at him now, which is why he's drowning in insecurity. Then something unexpected happened. Xian slapped Evan. The impact spun her around, but she felt totally happy and didn't feel a thing. The prince looked like a tiny, pathetic little kitten right then. He even started stuttering, which made him even cuter. Then he demanded the bookmark again, but she wanted to mess with him a little more. And the prince totally lost it again because she was acting up in front of royalty, so she told him to go cry to daddy about it. Not that it'd help, since the emperor only remembers his sons exist at official events. Then Evan turned to leave, telling him to find her at the magic faculty if he really needed that bookmark. She couldn't stop grinning about her souvenir on the way back. She was so pumped, she was ready to fight even Reina, and kicked her while she was sleeping when she got to the room. That pissed off the redhead and she threw fire, but she cooled down quick. And when Evan confessed about the side job, Raina got curious too. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door and called for Evan. It was a student telling her the headmaster wanted to see Leif because she'd stolen something from the prince. They ID'd her right away from the description Sion gave. And then nosy Raina stuck her head in, even feeling a little bad for her friend. In the office, the prince immediately started yelling at Evan. But the teacher thought it'd be best to hear Evan's side of the story first. The prince wasn't having it though, calling her a thief straight up. But the teacher wanted to hear from the student herself if His Highness's accusations were true. The girl just silently pulled the bookmark out of her pocket. Sion went ballistic, saying it was direct proof of theft and the little thief should be punished. But he was speechless when he saw Evan swallow it. The prince wasn't just shocked, he turned green with rage, while Leif looked totally satisfied. Sion turned back to the professor, and he asked the student to explain, but she insisted she hadn't stolen anything. She won the bookmark in a fight with Sion. Subtly, she used magic on the prince, and he confirmed her story. And the professor decided to drop the issue, since the bookmark was acquired fairly. Suddenly, the dean burst into the office, looking for Evan. Then, he started apologizing to the prince, saying he shouldn't have bothered coming here himself. He even promised to personally handle any problem he had. And Evan was the only one who noticed the dean practically groveling at Sion's feet, and Sion was just loving having a lackey like that. But she had a bad feeling about this, like things were about to get rough for her. Then the dean whispered that the duke had told him everything and asked her to leave the prince to him and not to worry about a thing. The girl couldn't figure out what her dad had to do with any of this. Then a professor came up to her and said she'd really settled in nicely and praised her for her good behavior. I mean, when she came in, she greeted everyone properly like she should. Plus, her instincts are top-notch, which is what keeps people like her alive longer. Then, he suggested that if she survived until 4th year, she should come to him, and he'd help her right up until graduation. But Evan turned him down because she just couldn't stand the guy. All he said was he's the best professor in the whole senior year, and she'd be begging to come to him. While he was talking, Evan checked her status window. The plot just took another turn, which surprised her, because she barely did anything. But it's probably not got anything to do with the prince either. Evan figured it's gotta be because the professor offered to be her mentor, which is weird, because he wasn't even mentioned in the original story. But maybe he was under a different name, which if Evan knew, she'd figure out what kind of guy he is. Too bad there isn't even a nameplate on his desk. Guess she'll just have to ask him for a business card then, because his name's gotta be on that. She blurted out she changed her mind, still totally freaking out. The monster aura thing didn't work, even though it was fine with Raina and the dean, and she bowed even deeper to this professor than she did to Hubert, which means this guy's way worse than any monster. Evan wanted to see how strong he was, so she tried to kneel. Yeah, that worked out about as well as face-planting into the floor. The professor was kinda surprised by the deep bowing for a business card, and she was already shaking from pure terror. After getting the card, Leif hurried to get out of there. Then she bolted outside, gulping down the fresh air, realizing how close she'd come to disaster. She didn't stop to catch her breath until she was around the next corner. Then she went to check the name of this monster with the suffocating aura, but it just said he was a regular professor. Evan freaked out, and we still don't know her name. Though in this world, a name like that is totally possible, especially since she's walking around with 2 chips implanted in her. Right now, all she cares about is getting the highest score possible. First things first, she decided to boost her poison resistance, like up to level 5. But ferns aren't gonna cut it, so Evan's heading over to the science building to find something with a bit more bite. Suddenly, she spotted that stalker chick. The girl looked a little different now, and she wasn't hiding her face behind her hair anymore. The stalker walked up and confessed she'd gotten a haircut. She asked for an opinion, but Evan was honest, saying it looked awful. That's when the stalker showed off the scissors she used. Evan thought they looked way too sharp, like you could easily use them as a murder weapon. Still, she grabbed them and trimmed that Butterfinger's bangs. Looked way better now, and Leif was digging cutting hair, so she offered to make her a client. Their chat got cut short real quick by a blast of flames. That pissed Evan off, cause Raina almost torched her masterpiece, but she just scoffed. They started arguing, but the professor shut him down. That woman with the nasty attitude just started ripping into the students. But she was there to start class, and first she was going to introduce a guest, a professor from the academy. He came to check it out because he was bored. Then he introduced himself to the students as just a regular professor, and Evan wondered what he was really doing there. But for my own safety, I decided to steer clear of him. Then they announced that no students would be expelled until the end of freshman year, because the priest's consultation would happen right around then. Everyone here served one god, the one who controlled destiny, and those who worship him in every way are called priests of fate. and they can actually predict a person's destiny. But really, they weren't seeing the future, just on version of it. They used a magical biochip for that, which acted as a gateway connecting them to the god of destiny. That's why they invite a priest at the end of the school year for career counseling. Everyone's dying to pass this test, which is why they put up with this prison-like academy life. But class is starting now, and the professor warned anyone abusing their skills that they'd be coughing up blood. After that, she handed out counters to the students. The professors decided she's personally checking them every time they use magic from now on. They gotta push it to the limit, right up to the point where they start bleeding. Now Evan understood why the ground around here had that reddish tint. Suddenly, the stalker chick piped up, asking what happens to someone with 2 types of magic. That got the professor's attention too, and Evan figured out this girl could sharpen anything, just like those scissors she used to cut her hair. The stalker girl straight up admitted it herself. Layef was blown away that such a cutie had such strong magic. With sharpening and poison skills, she could pass for a serial killer. But with that poison skill, Evan can finally test her own resistance. First, she decided to get to know her properly, and the girl said her name was Kana. Reina cut them off again, blasting fire. But Evan instantly countered with ice spears. She was seriously pissed that the redhead ruined their chat. But Reina reminded her they had to use their magic till they dropped. So Evan switched tactics. She slipped on the ring without anyone noticing, and peppered Reina with spears until she was spent. The redhead couldn't figure out why she lost so damn fast. Layef was stoked about the win, thanks to her secret weapon that Reina could never beat. She's got an endless supply of ice, because she's tapping into the relic. And as long as she keeps it a secret, no one will be the wiser. But then the professor called her over. Then, he asked her to take the ring off her finger. The girl was floored. No idea how he knew about the family heirloom since she was being sneaky. Looks like he's so strong he can sense the ring's power. Evan was gonna ask him straight up how he knew. But first he demanded she do him a favor. Then he admitted he can identify artifacts. He also explained that cheating won't make you stronger, and you gotta work honestly at this gig. Evan knew he was right and took off the ring. But now she was worried, because she'd been using a ton of magic. And as soon as she tried to make an ice spear, she started coughing up blood, like, bad. And the professor told her to measure her power later. The girl felt like she was gonna pass out and bolted to the infirmary, not understanding why she felt so damn awful. Kana went after her, because she's her first real friend ever. She wanted to grab Evan's favorite fruit on the way and take it to her in the infirmary. But Reina stepped in. The redhead explained that Layef would be pissed if Kana showed up. She's dying in pain right now and won't want to see her gloomy face. But the stalker wasn't buying it. She already knew so much about her. Even a detective would be jealous. It even creeped Reina out, and Kana admitted it was an occupational hazard. The truth is, she was from an assassin organization and was afraid Evan might find out. Though Layef isn't the kind of person to be prejudiced because of someone's job. Reina even called her a friend, even though that old geezer swore Kana could never be liked because of the scar. That's why she was stalking the professor, to kill him, even though he was the first to show her kindness. But it was just regular kindness, and Evan gave her solid advice. So Kana messed up her bangs on purpose, just trying to get her attention. Unlocking those poison combo skills really helped with that too. And when Evan actually fixed her hair, Kana's heart went wild. It was the kind of feeling she imagined having with a friend. She decided to help Leif build up a resistance to poisons. But right now, that red-headed chick Reina was getting in the way of seeing her friend, and was the whole reason Evan was out cold. Kana was seriously thinking about just offing the redhead, but they had to stop when they saw the prince, though Reina didn't recognize him at first. He wanted to know where Evan was, and that really pissed him off. But when she took a closer look, she realized it was Prince Xian, though Kana knew him right away. Xian was looking for Evan because she'd been assigned a 30-hour task on campus grounds. He needs this girl to be his personal assistant in the library. Then Reina explained that Lef was unconscious in the infirmary and probably wouldn't recover anytime soon. But the prince didn't give a damn about those problems. Xian ordered them to take him to the infirmary, and both students simultaneously thought about killing him. He doesn't have any real power, even though he's a prince. Usually in mage families, the gift is only passed down to women. But there are cases where men pass on their knowledge out of fear of genetic diseases. This can only happen once every 3 generations, and it's mostly intended for the eldest daughter. The same goes for the imperial family. The emperor was that 1 in 3 generation case, and his heir is his eldest daughter. So the prince is basically talentless and has no support. There's no reason to cave to his demands, but Reina didn't want to cause a scene on the way to the infirmary. All 3 of them showed up to see Evan. The girls were worried, but the prince just wanted her to carry his books, and they were all begging her to pick one of them. The girl had no clue what kind of garbage they were spouting. but she admitted she'd choose the prince's side no matter what. The professor sitting with her was shocked at how suddenly she got better, and then she immediately dropped to all fours in front of Xian. Turns out she just fell because she was dizzy, but that didn't stop her, and her friends were pissed that she chose the prince over them. He just smirked and ordered Evan to follow him. Now the girls have an even bigger reason to off his highness. Even Kana had to admit, the royal family wouldn't mourn him for long, and Evan felt like she'd lost her mind. But she was still stoked about that date with the prince in the library. All in all, today turned out to be pretty productive for her. Walking behind him, she caught a whiff of Xian's scent, which seemed familiar, almost like medicine. It was definitely the stuff they used to put on the wounds on her back. And now, she couldn't figure out why His Highness reeked so strongly of the same medicine. To get to the bottom of it, she straight up told Xian he stank. He just got pissed and yelled at her. But even with that angry face, she thought he was kinda cute. Anyway, she confessed that she knew the smell of the medicine, 'cause she uses it herself. And that's when it hit her. He was wounded. The prince didn't bother explaining, just shoved a list at her and told her to get all the books. And she had to check them out under her name. All these books are about head law and politics, so now it's obvious why he doesn't want his name on them. 'Cause then everyone'd know he didn't get a proper education at home, and he'd be a laughingstock. Evan's heart actually skipped a beat, thinking the prince wanted to learn. Xian noticed she was still staring, and she covered by saying, "There's a new edition of the law book, and newer versions of the other books too." Then Evan went to sort it out and asked the librarian for everything she needed. Soon, she was back with a pretty hefty stack of books, but the prince wasn't exactly thrilled, thinking this upstart was just making fun of him, like always. And then, get this, she offered to let him carry all the stuff himself. On top of that, she laid into him about all his insecurities and how he'd become a jerk who puts other people down. That got to him so bad, he grabbed a book and was about to smack the hell out of this sassy girl. But he didn't do it, because Evan was right. He's not just weak mentally, but physically too, and Leaf recommended he start jogging. And if he's too embarrassed to work out at his place, he can do it at the magic faculty. And that was it. She left Xian standing there. She was getting similar criticism from the professor, who said her fainting spell was from lack of physical strength. Then she got a notification, realizing the plot had changed again. She got more points for that, and spent them on leveling up her poison resistance skill. By then, she was starving and headed to the cafeteria. But the food was super greasy, needed to replenish her calories, but it was making her want to puke. And the girl was just forcing it down. Kana, who'd been looking all over for her, came up to her, and Evan was stoked for an excuse to ditch the gross food. Then Kana confessed that she wanted to help her out and invited her over to her room later. She knew Evan was trying to level up her skills, and Evan was like, "What's with the sudden generosity?" But Kana genuinely wanted to help, 'cause they're friends, and even started crying, worried she'd get rejected. Evan agreed. She was gonna ask for help anyway. The other student was thrilled, told her to come over right after she finished eating, and bounced. Laif realized that Kana wasn't as strong as she thought, because Kana couldn't bring herself to bow before her. Still, her skills are definitely assassin-like. That evening, Evan went to see her, and Kana immediately handed her a mug, telling her to drink it all down. That seemed a little shady, but Evan agreed to drink it, all the while keeping an eye on her system window to monitor any changes. Experience decreased by 10 points, and for some reason, Kana started giggling, like she was plotting something, but she kept saying she just wanted to help her friend. At first, Evan wanted to refuse, but her body felt fine, so she stayed. She decided to find out how resistant Kana herself was to poisons, but Kana didn't understand the question. Life hinted that it would be good to have an accomplice. Kana's warming up, which means teamwork, and their first time working together. Then she admits she's resistant to poisons, but it's not a skill. They were just trained with it since childhood. Plus, her resistance is probably even higher than Evan's. The deeper left dug, the sketchier it seemed, so she straight up asked if Kana was part of some assassin group. Freaked out, Kana insisted she's got nothing to do with them. Evan only thought that because of her skills and training, but you can tell from her face, she's not lying. If she were an assassin, she wouldn't be messing around at the academy. She's got a bright future, and Evan needs her ability. Then she went to lay out her plan, after warning her that it's stupid. Laef's planning to use poison on the math exam, so everyone except her ends up in critical condition. She wants to be the only one to pass the test, and that got Kana thinking. And Evan needed an answer, like yesterday. Honestly, Kana promised to help out however she could, even offered to whip up a poison that'd make the others bleed out. But Laef shut that down. No killing necessary, the students just need to be asleep for the exam. This girl was giving off more and more killer vibes, but Evan needed her help, and soon enough, she got a box full of poisons. They're a good mix, which will help Lef boost his resistance skill and knock everyone else out cold. Before saying goodbye, Kana wanted to double-check how it would all work and pulled out a candle with some kind of medallion. That whole best friends reminder was already starting to get on Evan's nerves. Except the look in her eyes said she was being real. Evan was even thrown for a loop, realizing she was expecting some comforting words back, and confirmed they were friends. That poor girl, it just broke her heart and she started crying. But Laef had her own stuff to do, so she didn't stick around and said goodbye to Kana. The next day, she headed to the training grounds to get a little workout in. They do morning exercises here every day at 6 a.m. sharp. And you get stamps for participating that you can trade at the store. And most of the people here are homeless mages. Evan was already planning on working out, but getting stamps made her even more pumped. She started stretching when a young dude in workout gear came up and gave her a cheerful greeting. With a voice like an old geezer, he introduced himself as the head of Startown. The guy noticed it was the girl's first time here, and she probably didn't know where the song that was playing came from. It was written by the former head of the magic faculty. Then this psycho started dancing to the music, trying to get Evan to join in. It seemed totally weird and not like any workout she knew. Plus, the song was dumb. But when the chorus hit, it was all about cursing the Empire. And everyone instantly started singing along, wanting the Empire cursed. Like some cult doing a ritual, Evan decided not to overthink it and just joined in too. Now the song didn't seem so crazy, and her heart started pounding like crazy. When it was all over, she was actually glad she'd agreed to dance. Then the guy explained they weren't homeless, just living in tents, and invited her over, giving her a stamp. That's just the first one. You need at least 100 to go to the store. But now she's got a shot at racking up points and kicking Reina out of the room. Time for another greasy meal after that workout. Next up was pushing my limits, which, surprise, I failed at again. But hey, at least the daily grind's helping me build strength. Evan was so swamped, she missed the cherry blossoms blooming, which means midterms are right around the corner. Other departments were buzzing too. Everyone headed to general assemblies. Except for the magic department, because those psychos would probably off each other. Maybe that's why they banned crossing between departments until we get our licenses. Just another day wrestling with this broom, when Evan spots Professor Heinrich, looking all depressed and shaky again. Guess it's tough for him to teach, even without that stalker chick around. Dude's gonna start seizing up just from touching commoners soon, and he doesn't even have an assistant. Evan figured she'd help him out, hoping to get a little something for her trouble. Though she knew if it was a mental thing, she was screwed. Skills were all she could offer. Nobody answered her knock, so she just kicked the door open. Heinrich freaked and threatened to fail her, but she was there to have a serious talk. She knew what his problem was and offered to help him out. The professor hesitated for a second, but Evan just yanked his glove right off. In the blink of an eye, she grabbed his hand, sending a shiver down his spine. But no matter how hard Evan tried, nothing happened. This guy probably does have some serious mental issues and just hates this kind of stuff. And that's when the girl realized she was totally screwed.